Welcome to the basement. Today we're back on the Farmbike, or the 1972 TS250, and what we're at the moment is this engine. You can see has a blown main bearing that luckily I picked up in the last race before it could do much damage, but today we're going to pull the engine out, place the bearings, and put it all back together and back in. So we'll take this engine over to the bench and get into it. Now, first, a tip someone told me that I wish I'd known earlier is when removing case bolts that are all a different length, quickly sketch the shape of the case. Does not need to be accurate. Quickly draw on. God, that is horrendous. The bolts. With a screwdriver or anything pointy, pre-punch your holes. Nice and easy. And that saves you a lot of time when you put the case back together. So now we'll take our bolts out. And it gives you a great reference. Clutch. And radial arm means we can pop it off nice and easy. Beautiful TM250 clutch. Now, let's get this gasket out of the way. Broken. That's good. These undo clutch basket bolts evenly. On some bikes they will snap. I recommend always keeping your parts organized, and for the clutch parts we have an empty can of my dog's fish oil. Doesn't have to be fancy. And don't forget our circlet. Now this, while not your most common tool, actually has a good amount of foam around it that helps me get off this tricky bolt without any special tools. Easy as that. Always look after your keyways. Now for clutch cover parts we have some yogurt. Now these screws in here, you really want to have the right tool. And I don't have mine. Impact driver's missing its Phillips. Awesome. It's okay. We found it. A good Phillips is essential for these because they are easy to strip. So we just go through one at a time. Give it a tap. Now, the gear selector. Whatever you do, do not pull this out in a hurry. Both of these two prongs are spring loaded, and if you're not careful, those springs will disappear real fast. I have done this. I can tell you it sucks. So yeah, release it slowly, and then you'll see got the two missiles that get launched if you're not careful, and then the little springs inside. Okay, circlips. Thanks to my friend Chris who just gave me these. Awesome bit of kit. Worth, made in Germany. Slight warning here, this plate here retains the gearbox shaft which the clutch springs push against. When I went to too strong clutch springs, it actually caused this plate to deform and two gears to connect that weren't meant to, resulting in explosion. So stick to the standard clutch springs is what I found. More cardboard. Okay. Now if you haven't used one of these, this is a crankcase splitting tool. Pretty essential if you're looking to own two-strokes. How it works is uses these 3 points to hold onto the crankcase while the big central bolt pushes on the crankshaft, and that will lift the case off, splitting the heap of sealant that's holding it down. Now all of these are different heights to help it pull evenly, so it's quite important you put the right height adapter with the corresponding level of the puller. Out of the way. You can see I have not done a great job of getting this to pull evenly. It needs a bit of adjustment. Okay, ready to go. Now since this pulls from the front, I like to give it a bit of a tap on the back with a rubber mallet just to make sure we're coming away nice and even. The tool's done its job. Crankcase off. And now the inside of the beautiful TS250 engine. Don't forget, for the TS crank you've got your plate and spacer. When I leave it sitting, I fill the crankcase with a bit of petrol and oil just to stop the methanol doing any damage in here, rusting out metal parts, or even when you flush it, it still seems to have a bit of methanol hanging around. Now the gearbox, for which we have crunchy peanut butter. Now here's our problem bearing. Still smooth, but has excessive play, which has caused the failure of this seal here. You can actually see it has deformed partially. I'm just going to have a bit of a tidy up here before we move on. Okay, tidied up, and as my little nephew would say, problem. As I've inspected the gearbox, I've come across a pretty serious issue, which I'm not sure if you can see in the video, but I'll put a photo up if not. But there's some pretty serious damage on the 5th gear. And this is a bit bigger problem than it looks. And I'm just going to go into a bit of background why. This is the TM250 parts catalogue by Suzuki, and this is the TS250. Now the TM250 is the racing motocross version, and originally they started using the same clutch system as the TS250, but it quite quickly became evident that it wasn't good enough to compete with what the other manufacturers were doing. So they made this new upgraded clutch, which is this countershaft 2 here. And so building a race bike, you really want this upgraded clutch system. But the problem with that is that most of the TM250s got blown up long ago, and parts for them are very rare and hard to get. So to get mine, I had to get a motor which looked like it had been in a swamp for 10 years and use those parts. But as we can see, unfortunately, the corrosion from being in the swamp looks like it's damaged the hardening and caused our gear to wear at a very rapid rate. So we're going to have to do something about that. Now, the TM250 gears, they also went to a different dog system that was a bit stronger to handle motocross rather than the trail riding / road riding of the TS. And you can see that just if you look at the end of that drive shaft there, it's different. But the drive shaft is exactly the same, the bearings are the same, the gear ratios are the same, but you can't interchange the gears. So we have a problem. Now a while ago I managed to get a box of TM250 new old stock gears off a dealer that was doing a clear out. But unfortunately I seem to have pretty much everything but 5th gear. So that's not an option. Always the way. So our solution is we swap out the drive shaft for a full new second-hand TS one I have that is in good condition. And then in terms of our counter shaft, put that back together. We're going to have to take all the gears off the TS one and put them onto the TM one to mean I can run a full TS gear set which makes it easier going forward as I have quite a few spare TS gearboxes, but keep the good racing clutch. So yeah, this job's just growing bigger, but we have a solution. So let's crack on. There's a good example of the two different shafts, but everything from this point on to there is the same. It's from here to there is the difference, where this runs a solid bearing, that runs a more modern roller bearing. Grid countershaft and gear set complete. Now that wasn't our only problem. We have a more minor problem here that we can quickly solve, but this bearing in the case here, I'm not quite, even though it's quite new, I'm not quite happy with how it feels. So while we've got it open, we're going to replace it. Okay, starting with the drive side crankcase, we'll remove the main seal, remove the main bearing, give it a good clean up, onto the next one. I'll remove the main bearing, we're going to do it on the press. Okay, main bearing cold, ready to go. Crankcase heated up to 100 degrees. Bearing in the freezer. Slipped straight in, didn't need the press. Now we've got our little gearbox bearing. Straight in. Easy as that. The new main seal, with the help of a little bit of rubber grease, should just push in. Okay, time for the other side. Bit of a closer view this time so you can see what's going on. Frozen bearing ready. Let's grab the case out of the oven. Not so lucky this time. Now this bearing doesn't have a stop as the seal sits on the inside, so you've got to be very careful to stop it just down enough to let the oil gallery be open, but not too far. So I think we're pretty good. The oil gallery I'm talking about, see right here, so you got to make sure the bearing's in far enough that the gearbox oil can track through that channel into the bearing. Or else you're going to be in trouble. Now we've got our cases pretty much ready for assembly, but I thought I'd show you something interesting here that's not common on mini bikes at all, and that relates to the seal. This is the old one, but the seal that's going for the crankshaft is inside of the bearing. So as you can see it, a conventional one, say on this side, the seal goes outside the bearing. And here, the oil seal is right next to the crankshaft, inside the bearing. And that's because this bearing runs on the oil of the gearbox, which gives it a constant, steady oil supply, but does have a slight disadvantage through load by pushing the main bearing a bit further away from the center of the crankshaft. But the only issues I've had is this bearing, so I think it's quite a good system where it gives one of the main bearings consistent oil flow, and then this one's fed from the oil pump. So well done, Suzuki. I like it. That leaves us with 2 crankcases and a gearbox ready to go back together. Well, that's the end of Sloppy Bottom End Part 1. This week I'll get on to putting the engine back together, including putting the ignition in, setting the timing, top end back on, in the bike, and hopefully get started on the new muffler for the exhaust, but we'll see how we go. And as always, I'm not a professional, I just love doing this. I'm definitely not perfect, so if you have any ways to do these things better, please let me know. I can take the criticism. If you enjoy what you're seeing, I'll see you next week. Cheers.